I wanted to start off the video originally with like some Caleb Hammer videos or something showing some other fiscally irresponsible people, but I figured what I'm talking about already is a very fiscally irresponsible person, so I'll get my point across eventually. Towards the end of high school, I ended up living with a friend of mine who was actually renting out from a family friend, but he wasn't actually getting any money. So that led me even more to believe that he was probably very well off and just had a lot of money. First and foremost, this was like a mini mansion, followed up with a bunch of nice cars out front and some street bikes and other fancy vehicles in the garage. I thought this guy was some well off retired tech guy or something, or maybe even an early Bitcoin kid, which even at the time was pretty early. But my friend ended up telling me the reality of things, which ended up being pretty sad. He told me, his parents passed away a few years prior, and he ended up getting roughly $750,000 from the both of them as an inheritance. But he got that as a lump sum and was just on his own at that point and probably didn't have much of a financial reasoning at the time. I think he was probably 18 when this happened. So it kind of makes a little bit more sense as to why there wasn't any logic behind the spending or the retention of money. It wasn't apparent how bad things were until I started to put all the numbers together that he had received $750,000 roughly a few years ago. And by the time I was living with them, he had maybe 100,000, more than likely less, and it was very quickly dwindling away. And this was mainly because of his lifestyle and also supporting the family living under him. He drank a lot of Monster and paid full MSRP on these. Imagine if you were to drink 60 or more Monsters per month and didn't even bother to do any sort of bulk deals like going to Costco or hell, even Walmart. No, just going straight to the gas station and getting at best maybe a 2 for $5 deal. That was adding up very quickly. Along with just buying all the things that you would think would buy your happiness at the time, it was about $250,000 worth of assets, maybe. At least that's how much I know was spent. Value wise, I would say less than half of that. It's easy to look back on all of the financial decisions that he had made and have solutions for pretty much everything that had happened. But unfortunately, at the time, I was only 18. And even though I was just as concerned as I would be now, I didn't have as much financial advice that I could have given him at the time. Not that he would have even really listened to me, being an 18-year-old. But what I do take from this story every time, because I remember this story very often, especially when I'm going over my own finances, is to use it as perspective. It helps me remember it is all about spending habits. It is all about lifestyle. Even if you do have an expensive lifestyle, work towards making it sustainable. Because if you can't afford a lifestyle, you are on a very tight time frame, plainly put. You're either going to run out of the money that you have, or you're going to drive yourself so far into debt that you will ruin yourself. Even if you plan on trying to square it away and get forgiven or whatever, it's not a lifestyle to live. I want to use this video as a way to use this as an example, since I've realized that a lot of the times when I have tried to give financial advice to some of my friends in the recent past, I feel like the missing perspective is this story. And even telling that story still doesn't really drive home exactly what I'm trying to explain. So this is probably going to be multiple videos that I end up making with this, but hopefully this gives off at least a good chunk of what I'm trying to portray. Now I'm going to bring up another example, and if the person that I'm referencing here is watching this video, I'm sorry, you'll know who you are, but this is a good point of overextending yourself and not knowing all of your options. I had a friend of mine who was trying to buy a car, and he ended up buying a Ford Ranger, which not a bad choice, not at all. And even for the price that he paid relative to just the general vehicle that he bought, not a bad price either. He ended up paying $1,600 for I want to say it was a 96 V6 Ranger. It ran, it had some problems, but for the price, I would expect it. It wasn't that much of a burden, at least in the right hands. However, the preface of this is how he acquired this vehicle. He ended up making payments to get this vehicle, which is fine in some aspects, but when you're getting the vehicle after you've finished the payments, it makes you question, why didn't you just save up the money on your own and then let yourself have an open market to choose from? The only exception that I can think of is you find something that you absolutely want, that you know is a gem, that is so hard to find, and you have to at least lock it in. But this is a 90s Ford Ranger that we're talking about. So there isn't really any reasoning for that. It really goes into the right mindset. The heart is there, but the brain fully isn't. The heart wants to save up the right amount of money. They set the right goal of, I want to get this car. It's within the right price range, but I don't have the discipline to save that money. So instead of being able to put it in my bank account where I will see it go from 350 to 700 to 1050 and so on, I'm going to just give it to this person so that I don't see that number go up because I know that money is now gone. Otherwise, if I just save it up in my account, it's going to just get burnt through the other side, meaning it's just going to be spent on something else, squandered. I saw right through it, and I understand and I applaud it for the reasoning of trying to set forth some sort of coping mechanism for an issue, but it's more of a band-aid than it is a solution. It essentially hindered him from having options and just enabled a problem that's continuing on. Again, the reason why I mention this is every instance of things like this that I hear or see or even experience myself, I'll bring up things that I've experienced myself at some point. All these things add up into how I give advice to other people. Having it all in one place, I feel like will kind of help add validity to that as to where my mindset goes to for financial thoughts. Because anytime I make a financial decision, I think about the story about that $750,000 loss. I think about my friend with the Ford Ranger. I think about a bunch of other of my friends' situations, former and current. I've gotten to see and experience these things, and they affect those decisions. Shortly after moving out of that house, I had started to build my own financial ground, I guess. I don't know how to describe it at this point, but I started to build it and I started to build my credit. I started to, figure out what my values were in that sense, I guess, to an extent. I still had a spending problem for sure, because every time I look back, I always question where all my money went since I was living with my parents at the time. But still, even then, I would have considered myself at least somewhat financially savvy because my credit cards were always paid off every month. I made sure that every statement balance was paid by the due date. There was nothing past due. Nothing was overextended in any ways. However, I was still probably extending myself to very near the limit, but I would never, ever let anything lapse or go over. This created some of an issue because it gave me that false confidence thinking that I was so financially savvy that I didn't really have to worry about a spending issue at any point in time. But they can develop very quickly, especially after one or two life-changing instances, whether it be positive or negative. I'll bring up for myself, I was unemployed back in 2022, and then shortly after I ended up gaining employment. But during my unemployment, everything was pretty tight money-wise, and I was doing my best to manage everything and keep everything as tight as possible, but of course, without a job, it's very hard to keep things going positively in terms of finances. So eventually I ended up having to get a job, but the difference between having no job and then finally getting one was like having $100 and then receiving $10,000 in relativity. So shortly after getting my job and realizing that I had a steady form of income, my lifestyle had immediately changed. I went from being nice and tight on my money to then spending on toys, my business, all sorts of things in between. At least some of the assets are still here, but again, I fell into a spending habit. The same thing that I had previously laughed at people for, and I'm still recovering from it, but it's how you manage it. I feel like even though I'm kind of back in a similar point in time where I'm living tight, it's actually more comfortable than it was before. And not for the sake of any difference of relative money, like even with inflation, it's more so of just a mindset. I have one other instance that I have that's pretty recent that Shai was actually telling me about. One of her friends was asking for help financially, which isn't always an issue in that sense. Some people do end up being a bad hand, and if they demand help is one thing, but if they're asking for help while also trying to work for themselves, it's another thing. But then putting yourself into a bad financial position and then asking for help even, let alone demanding help or expecting help, is completely just I don't even know how to put it, but it's something that was witnessed. And the reason why I'm bringing it up was it originally started out as just someone asking for financial help, mainly just, getting money, not advice or anything like that. I guess maybe there was some advice seeked in there, but it was mainly just fishing for money. And then subsequently, I want to say it was like about 2 weeks or so later, same person had spent like $1,000 of their 5,000 allowance on some hair products or something after receiving a $250,000 loan to pay off their debts. This whole thing, when this was said to me, none of it made sense. And I had to have it explained to me several times over. And I'm probably gonna have to explain it again here in this video because it doesn't make sense. This person is in several tens of thousands of dollars worth of debt and having frequent financial problems to the point of asking publicly on a community and then immediately using a relief program, which is more than likely either a predatory or very risky leverage, or however you want to put it. They want to use that as a way to continue their bad spending habits and lifestyle. Boiling it down, again, it goes into bad lifestyle, bad spending habit. It's okay to have a bad lifestyle if you can figure out how to accommodate it. But if your way of accommodating for it is to just cycle debt, it's only going to be perpetual to a point and then end in the ground. I'm not sure exactly how much this person was in debt for beforehand, but $250,000 to pay off a good majority of it, or all of it for that matter, and then having enough extra to have 5,000 to herself and however much money that the husband had gotten, because this is all under the husband, allegedly. The husband had pulled this 250 to pay off the other loans and all this stuff and get them out of debt, and apparently was enough to have some play money, in their words. And 5,000 was given to the wife, whereas we have no idea how much he probably played with. My thoughts was it's probably in the $10,000 to $50,000 range. Who knows? Regardless, these are very bad financial decisions. If you're already in debt, you should not be thinking of any money as play money. No money is play money. It is a recouping your loss game at that point. That is it. Furthermore, the reason why this scenario kind of piqued my interest was thinking about the actual size of this exchange here. So we're talking about $250,000. So this was it wasn't disclosed, but it sounded like it was some sort of debt to consolidate other debt, of course. But I don't ever hear of large cap debt consolidation like that, like $250,000 worth. I feel like institutions would only be willing to give somebody that already seems to have a bad credit history anywhere more than $50,000 to $100,000. But who knows? It might be out there. I don't do research into that stuff because I wouldn't even want to consider that sort of stuff. Because if you're already in that sort of position, probably got some other things you want to change first. I immediately assumed that this is more than likely a leverage on their house because, to my knowledge, they do live in a house, and I would have to assume at this point that they more than likely own it. I'm not sure the specifics and logistics when it comes to their original mortgage payment, but I can already imagine, based on the financial literacy of them, it probably isn't the best deal. It could be anywhere between like a 4% and a 6% interest rate on a house that's terribly overvalued at the time that they bought it. Who knows? Regardless, they have now also more than likely leveraged $250,000 against this house, with the mindset, mind you, of paying off the debt, which is good, but then also thinking that they can still have play money after the fact. If you had $50,000, hypothetically, or even $10,000 or even the $5,000 after paying all those debts, that should be put right back into your bank account, or that should be put back into an investment vehicle more than anything. That shouldn't be put back into your account unless you are barely scraping by and you need a cushion. And if you're there, again, you got bigger problems you need to focus on. But if you have $250,000 worth of debt, or let's say $200,000 worth of debt, and you now have $50,000, why not put that into something that can at least help you recover some of that interest rate? I ask this like as if, who I would be talking to hypothetically would even understand the concept of what I'm talking about. I say all these things to give everybody watching a perspective on finances. from other people, to see how bad other people manage their finances. This isn't to make you feel good and to make you feel like, oh, well, at least I'm doing good. Might as well go grab me a Starbucks to treat myself. No, it's to kind of put things into perspective in the same way that I do when I'm doing my finances and thinking, oh man, I might be able to treat myself. I then think about these sorts of stories, whether I'm in a recovery mode or not, because you always have to be asking yourself, do I need this thing? Can I live without it? If I didn't purchase this today, can I purchase it tomorrow if I need to? Do I need to purchase it tomorrow? Can I just live without it? Can I make it on my own? All sorts of things in between. Can I get it for cheaper? Figure out a way for it. Never pay full price for something unless you absolutely have to. Figure out a way to make your lifestyle more affordable. If you like to drink soda every day, for example, go buy it in bulk. If you know that you're going to drink 30 plus cans of soda within a month, go buy a case or two from Costco instead of going down to the store. If you know that you're going to drink a beer or two every night, go down and buy a pack from the liquor store. And it's so funny. The only thing that I can think of as like a logical argument, and even then, again, you got bigger problems at this point, is, well, if it's all there, I'm going to end up drinking them all. Hell, I'll even bring up the fact that I do try to share with another friend of mine a way to save on their weed habit, because I can relate. I smoke weed. And when I'm buying my weed, I want to make sure that I'm getting good stuff, of course, but I also don't want to buy it by the eighth. I don't want to buy it by the gram. I'm going to go out and buy an ounce or more. I want to buy a good amount because it's going to be cheaper for one, and it's going to last. I know I'm going to smoke it within the month. It's not like it's going to go bad. So just get the larger amount for cheaper. And the only logical response to that would be, well, I can't afford it. Well, then the only thing that falls into that is just maybe a little bit of discipline somewhere, or maybe just a little bit of extra brain work to move some money around, where you save or cut corners somewhere for just a small amount of time so that you can afford that bulk saving one time. Because just that one time bulk saving might kickstart your saving process. Because maybe now, because you're not spending, hypothetically, let's go back to the monster example of 60 monsters, retail price, let's say good deal of 2 for $5, you're still paying like $150 per month for 60 monsters. Whereas you can go to Costco and get, let's say, 3 24 packs, you'll have more than what you'll drink, and you'll probably still pay under $100. You'd be saving $50. That's more than one case. You would literally be able to buy a whole extra case because of that. And that little bits of savings can kickstart a whole snowball of money. Money is a snowball in itself. If you start accruing a lot of debt, you're just going to keep building a lot more debt, especially with the wrong mindset. But if you have a decent amount of money and you start growing it, that can snowball into a massive, massive amount of money. And I'm not talking about just buying something and then selling it at a higher price, like even just figuring out investment vehicles that are out there. There's so many options, whether it be just being a standard seller on Marketplace, all the way up to doing stuff on brokerages and handling stocks. There's so many ways to make money. The opportunity is all there. It's just a matter of what you are willing to put the effort towards. As long as you do it enough for a short amount of time, you can get a snowball going. I'll put it this way. Everybody has two options if they want to try to keep the money that they have and grow the money that they have. Either hire a CPA or some sort of financial advisor that can actually give them real financial advice and help them grow that money realistically and safely, or either become one of those, a financial advisor or CPA, or study as if you were going to become one. Because if you're not willing to spend the money like me, to go to a CPA or a financial advisor, and also maybe don't trust everything that some people say, you don't want to have to nitpick between the lines, especially with someone you're already locked into and have to pay them a fixed monthly or yearly fee. You have to make one of those choices if you don't want to have to work for the rest of your life. If you want to try to have a decent shot at having an early retirement, you have to do one of those things. And I'm not doing this as a way to sell advice or anything like that either. In the same way that when I'm talking to people about engine rebuilds for rotaries and all that, I'll tell them, you could rebuild it yourself. I'd be happy to rebuild your motor for the right price, but at the same time, you can rebuild it yourself and all this sort of stuff. And I'm not going to give a full rundown, like a piece by piece, except for like when I'm making videos and all that. But I'm at least going to give you a decent little guidance and kickstart of here's what you need to do and here's the mindset you need to kind of have. And then it's up to that person of whether or not they're actually going to do it themselves or just fork out the money. And then that same mindset, you either got to listen to a CPA or a financial advisor, or you just have to put your nose into studying as much as you can and learning all of the financial stuff that you can. There's so much money to be saved and had by just learning the stuff that a financial advisor would tell you or learn themselves. People always talk about the rich and how they avoid taxes and all these sorts of things, like as if all of the same opportunities don't exist for everybody. It's just a matter of how hard it is to acquire those benefits, especially depending on how much money you make or have. In the same way that the more money that you have, especially in like the stock market or a bond or anything like that, the more money it's going to generate to you, the more that you're able to put into something, the more it's going to give back.